Jaycee Lee Dugard, an 11-year-old girl, was abducted from a street while walking to a school bus stop in Myers, California, United States. Searches began immediately after Dugard's disappearance, but no reliable leads were generated. Even though several people witnessed the kidnapping, Dugard remained missing for over 18 years until 2009, when a convicted sex offender, Philip Garrido, visited the campus of the University of California, Berkeley, accompanied by two adolescent girls, who were discovered to be the biological daughters of Garrido and Dugard. On August 24th and 25th of that year, the unusual behavior of the trio sparked an investigation that led Garrido's parole officer, Edward Santos Jr., to order Garrido to take the two girls to a parole office in Concord, California. On August 26th, Garrido was accompanied by a woman who was eventually identified as Dugard. Garrido and his wife, Nancy, were arrested after Dugard's reappearance. On April 28, 2011, they pleaded guilty to kidnapping and raping Dugard. Investigators revealed that Dugard had been kept in concealed tents, sheds, and lean-tos in an area behind the Garrido's house at 1554 Walnut Avenue in Antioch, California, where Philip repeatedly raped Dugard during the first 6 years of her captivity. During her confinement, Dugard gave birth to two daughters, who were aged 11 and 15 at the time of Dugard's reappearance. On June 2, 2011, Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life imprisonment. His wife, Nancy, was sentenced to 36 years to life. Garrido is a person of interest in at least one other missing persons case in the San Francisco Bay Area, as Garrido had been on parole for a 1976 rape at the time of her kidnapping. Dugard sued the state of California, which had taken over his parole supervision from the federal government in 1999, on account of the numerous lapses by law enforcement that contributed to her continued captivity and sexual assault. In 2010, the state of California awarded the Dugard family $20 million. Dugard also sued the federal government on similar grounds pertaining to Garrido's time as a federal parolee, but in a 2-to-1 ruling, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed that suit because Garrido had not victimized her at the time he was placed under the supervision of the federal parole system, and that as a result of this, there was no way to anticipate she would become his victim. On June 10, 1991, Dugard's mother, who worked as a typesetter at a print house, left for work early in the day. Dugard, who was 11 years old at the time, wore her favorite all-pink outfit as she walked up the hill from her house, against traffic, to catch the school bus. When she was halfway up the hill, a gray car approached her. She thought that the man driving the car was stopping to ask for directions. The driver, Philip Garrido, rolled down the window and tased Dugard unconscious with a stun gun before abducting her. His wife, Nancy, dragged Dugard into the car and removed her clothing, leaving only a butterfly-shaped ring that Dugard would hide from them for the next 18 years. Nancy covered Dugard with a blanket and held her down as Dugard drifted in and out of consciousness during the 3-hour drive to the Garrido's property, 120 miles away in Antioch. The only time Dugard spoke was when she pleaded that her parents could not afford a ransom. The district attorney in the Dugard case believed that Nancy had scouted Dugard as a prize for Garrido. Probin witnessed the abduction of his stepdaughter from within sight of their home. He saw two people in a mid-sized gray car, possibly a Mercury Monarch, make a U-turn at the school bus stop where Dugard was waiting, and a woman forcing Dugard into the car. He chased after them on a bicycle but was unable to overtake the vehicle. Some of Dugard's classmates were also witnesses to the abduction. Initial suspects included Probin and Ken Slayton, Dugard's biological father, though they did not know each other and Slayton had only had a brief relationship with Dugard's mother in 1979, not knowing he had a child. Probin took and passed several polygraph tests, and Slayton was also quickly cleared of suspicion. The kidnapping led to the breakup of Terry and Probin's marriage upon arriving at the Garrido's home in an unincorporated area of Antioch. The Garridos took Dugard, her head still covered with a blanket, behind their house, where they had constructed a series of dilapidated tents and sheds. Garrido placed Dugard inside a tiny shed that had been soundproofed. Dugard later stated in her memoir in an interview with ABC News that upon arrival, Garrido handcuffed her and left her naked in the shed, which he bolted shut, warning her that trained Doberman pinschers outside the shed would attack her if she tried to escape. Right after the abduction, Garrido forced Dugard into a shower with him, which was the first time she had been exposed to an unclothed man. During her first week in captivity, Dugard remained in handcuffs, her only human contact being Garrido, who sometimes brought her fast food and talked to her. He provided a bucket for her to use to relieve herself. A week after the kidnapping, Garrido raped the still handcuffed Dugard for the first time. He continued to rape her frequently. doing so at least once a week for the first 3 years of her captivity. At one point, Garrido provided Dugard with a television, but she could not watch the news, and remained unaware of the search for her. Almost a month and a half after her kidnapping, by Dugard's recollection, Garrido moved her to a larger room next door, where she was handcuffed to a bed. He explained that the demon angels let him take her and that she would help him with his sexual problems because society had ignored him. Garrido would occasionally go on days-long methamphetamine binges he called runs, during which he would force Dugard to keep him company by performing sexual favors and engaging in various other activities with him. Garrido made her listen out for the voices he said he could hear from the walls, and often professed a belief that he was a chosen servant of God. These binges would end with Garrido sobbing and apologizing to Dugard, alternating with threats to sell her to people who would put her in a cage. 7 months into her captivity, Garrido introduced Dugard to his wife, Nancy, who brought the child a stuffed animal and chocolate milk and engaged in the same tearful apologies to her, though Dugard craved the woman's approval at the time. In a 2011 ABC News interview, she stated that Nancy was just as manipulative as Garrido. Dugard related that Nancy alternated between motherly concern and coldness and cruelty, expressing her jealousy of Dugard, whom she regarded as the one to blame for her predicament. She characterized Nancy, who worked as a nursing home aide, as evil and twisted. When Garrido was returned to prison for failing a drug test, Nancy replaced her husband as Dugard's jailer. The Garrido's neighbor, Patrick McQuaid, told the San Jose Mercury News that as a child he recalled meeting Dugard through a fence in the Garrido's yard soon after the kidnapping. He said that she had identified herself by the name Jaycee and that when asked if she lived there or was just visiting, she answered that she lived there. At that point, Garrido came out and took her back indoors. He eventually built an 8-foot-tall 2.4-meter fence around the backyard and set up a tent for Dugard, the first time that she was allowed to walk outside since her kidnapping. The Garridos manipulated Dugard further by presenting her, on 2 occasions, with kittens that would later mysteriously vanish. When Garrido discovered that she was signing her real name in a journal that she kept about the kittens, she was forced to tear out the page with her name on it, the last time she would be permitted to say or write her name until her captivity ended. 18 years later, she was never allowed to see a doctor or dentist.
Almost 3 years into her captivity, the Garridos began to allow Dugard freedom from her handcuffs for periods, though they kept her locked in the bolted room. On Easter Sunday of 1994, they gave her cooked food for the first time. The couple informed Dugard that they believed that she was pregnant. Dugard, aged 13 at the time, had learned of the link between sex and pregnancy from television. Dugard watched television programs on childbirth in preparation for the birth of her first daughter, which occurred when Dugard was age 14, on August 18, 1994. After the birth of her first daughter, Garrido raped Dugard less frequently, though he would nonetheless do so when he had taken drugs. The last time Garrido raped Dugard was the day her second daughter was conceived. Her second daughter was born when Dugard was 17, on November 13, 1997. Dugard took care of her daughters using information learned from television and worked to protect them from Garrido. He continued his enraged rants and lectures. Dugard coped with her continued captivity by planting flowers in a garden and homeschooling her daughters. At one point, Garrido informed Dugard that to pacify his wife, Dugard and her daughters were to address Nancy as their mother and that she was to teach her daughters that Dugard was their older sister. When Dugard and her daughters were eventually allowed to come into contact with other people, this fiction was continued. Garrido operated a print shop where Dugard acted as the graphic artist. Ben Dodrell, a customer of Garrido's printing business, claimed that he met and spoke by telephone with Dugard and that she did excellent work. During this time, Dugard had access to the business phone and an email account. Another customer indicated that she never hinted to him about her childhood abduction or her true identity. 47 witnesses stated Dugard was seen in the Garrido household and sometimes answered the front door to talk to people, but never stated there was a problem or attempted to leave. While the family kept to themselves, the girls were sometimes seen playing in the secondary backyard behind the house, where Dugard's living quarters are thought to have been located. The private area of the backyard included sheds, one of which was used as a recording studio in which Garrido recorded himself singing religious-themed and romantic country songs, 2 homemade tents, and what has been described as a camping-style shower and toilet. The area was surrounded by tall trees and a 6-foot 1.8-meter high fence. An entrance to the secondary backyard was covered by trees and a tarpaulin. Privacy was enhanced by tents and outbuildings. Electricity was supplied by extension cords. The enclosure also housed a car that matched the description of the one used in the abduction.